Yeah, we've got heating people coming in. We've had a chronic issue with our boilers here for years. And so they are going to get changed out. I won't see that, but we're hoping next summer we're going to get a roof, we're going to get new boilers, we're going to get air conditioning.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's
It'll be an expensive summer.
very expensive. And then I think I'm pretty sure we're going to get solar over here.
Oh, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff percolating. So.
Big expense, huh?
Hello.
Big expense.
Huge expense, yeah. Huge, but you have to do it, so. That's the way it is. Our houses are like that too, right? You just have to, I always figured a third. Whatever the monthly bill was, I added a third for maintenance. And it worked out pretty close to that. Yeah. Hey, Maureen.
I'm not sure it's cold enough in here.
Well, we're gonna move. If it gets to be, well, we'll talk about it. Yeah.
What's wrong with the library? Is that
It's really because of the people at home that are watching. We'll have 10, 20, sometimes 30 people watching. Yeah. They comment about you, Karen.
what do they say?
Who is that, Karen?
So what story are we on today?
Well, I wanted to talk to you about that as far as what to do. I mean, this is a little bit, it seems like it's possible that I will be here. What's so funny, Maureen? This is not funny. I thought I'd be retired by now. There's nothing funny about this. But it looks like I'm probably going to be here at least through January. Maureen's the co-chair of the search committee, so she probably knows better than I do. But somewhere in that neck of the woods. So it's possible that we could have a little 4-weeker or something in there in January. So this probably will not be it. Okay? Like the outfit. And as a reminder, we have leftover Lyall lunch immediately following this. So if you want to have a little something to eat, you're welcome.
Actually, it's in one, isn't it? No, 12:30, so it's 12:30, good. What's on the menu? Whatever people bring.
I brought smoked whitefish from Western Michigan. It's awesome. So please don't eat it.
Please don't eat it?
Yeah. No, Peter Gay brings it for me when he's got a cottage.
Do they have salmon in the Great Lakes?
Mhm.
Oh, they do?
They sure do. Yeah. So, are we at? Well, let's get started. First of all, are you freezing to death? If we are, we're going to move.
It's not too bad.
Okay. Yeah, you guys, we've all toughened up, I think, over the last few years. If it is, just let me know and we'll do something about it. The other thing is, if you have a strong desire to look at a certain book of the Bible or certain stories in the Bible, I'm open to that. I went through the last 50 this morning, and there's lots in there, I guess. And but what we rarely talk about is St. Paul, right? I mean, most ministers that know what they're doing talk about St. Paul, it seems a lot. I thought maybe we'd do a little introduction to some of the bigger epistles of St. Paul, if you don't mind. I mean, we can do something else too, if that sounds good.
That's fine. St. Paul has always been hard to read for me.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
It's just
Right.
really, yeah.
Yeah, he's-
Everybody says what he says is great, but it's like I can't get to it.
Yeah, well, he's got run-on sentences. I mean, his grammar's okay, but his style is horrendously bad.
But he didn't write it.
He probably dictated it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he probably did. He mentions a scribe in his not every gospel, but yeah, he had eye problems, and so that made it tough for him to do that kind of thing. And he was a Pharisee, so he employs Pharisaic logic.
Would you say what that is?
Well, it's Pharisaic logic is a lot different than narrative. Right? A narrative is a story, and it's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. It usually has a core theme that runs throughout. Whereas he's doing theology, so he'll set up a truth, and oftentimes he will then employ the word therefore, and then this is why it matters. In other words, but there's often not a straight line from the pronouncement of truth to the therefore. It's right for those of you that have read St. Paul, you get that. So you got to kind of hang tough with him, and get the drift. I mean, one of my favorite questions in seminary, which they loved apparently, is who cares? I would raise my hand and say this, much to the delight of my professors. Who cares? What difference does it make? Why should I care? What's the matter here? And then that would stimulate some conversation. St. Paul's pretty good at that.
You wouldn't be up for revelation, would you?
No.
Figure.
No. No, I don't think so. And that's all I want to say. Goodbye. Thank you for your... Oh. Welcome. So is that okay? We'll just play around with St. Paul a little bit? Want to do that? Okay. Well...
It's fine with me.
Okay. So who was he?
He persecuted the Christians.
Yeah, he was a Pharisee. He was not a priest. He was a Pharisee. So that is a person.
He's a Pharisee.
A Pharisee is a lay person. a lay person in the synagogue. Yeah,
Someone educated class.
very educated. He was educated by Gamaliel, who was the teacher in Israel at the time. So he's got an incredible CV as far as that goes. So he was totally immersed in the scriptures, in tradition, in Haggadah and Halakha. These are the commentaries. You get the Old Testament, and then there are voluminous texts that comment on the Torah mostly. So he would know every bit of it. There was a professor at the University of Amsterdam. His name escapes me right now, but he taught Old Testament at University of Amsterdam prior to World War II, and his name is surfacing. He memorized every single word of the Old Testament in Hebrew. This is St. Paul. That's St. Paul. He would know absolutely every bit with this. And so that was some of his background. He's from Tarshish, north of Jerusalem.
Interesting conversion experience.
Right. So, but just prior to that, we have this new thing emerging called, followers of Jesus, which was originally called, before it was called the church, it was called People of the Way. Yeah, it's kind of neat. I like that myself. People on the move, people of the way. And this absolutely infuriated him. Thank God in the Middle East now things are calm and people are not bothered by these things as much as they used to be. So he went on a rampage and did his best to squash that movement that was seen as derelict or something. To the point where St. Paul, who was, I think, a first-class hater, he was he had his hand in the first martyrdom of the Christian church, and that was a deacon by the name of Stephen. And I don't know why deacons are preaching, but he did. Pretty incendiary, I would say, sermon. Glad I never did that. And so St. Paul, since he's a little older, wasn't part of the stoning. That's how Stephen was killed. I've said this before, but when a person gets stoned, and they were I don't mean stoned Timothy Leary stoned, but when they're stoned to death, a lot of people think, people are throwing stones at people. They're not. They're throwing bowling ball size stones. They're crushing the person. And so apparently St. Paul couldn't participate in that way, so he held everybody's coat so they could really loosen up, wind up. So what would you call it? An accessory to murder? Something along those lines? So that's our dear St. Paul. That's where he was at. And then he was on his way to Damascus, right? To offer love and support to the new church in Damascus.
Saul.
As Saul. He was Saul at this point, right? And no, he was there to clean house. And something happened to him on the way to Damascus. What happened? What happened to him?
He was struck blind.
Struck blind?
Was he struck off his horse too, or was he?
Let's say he did.
I can't remember where he was, what he was doing.
And what did he hear?
He heard Jesus saying, "Why do you persecute me?"
Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Who are you, right? It sounds like the burning bush kind of situation. Who are you? And then he was blinded for a time. He went to Damascus. God gave another person a vision in Damascus saying, "You've got a fabulous guest coming over." And Saul had already had a well-earned reputation of persecution of Christians. And the person that was, I forget his name right now. What was his name?
Cornelius? Was that Cornelius?
I think so.
That he went to visit?
Yeah. That took him in.
Yes.
He took him in, gave him hospitality, right? And he said to his, the boys, "You got to be kidding me." That's a rough translation, because this guy is dangerous. So he came in and he was taken care of by the church in Damascus and taught by the disciples a little later on. And he had his name changed. Anybody want to mention the importance of that?
Well, what happens whenever a major change comes about in somebody's life in the Bible.
That's right.
Abraham, Sarah.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. And we have that same thing going on here. He goes from Saul to Paul. Because whatever you were is no longer the case. Yourself, I mean, you know, Anna, it's good that you're here.
Is that the setup for confirmation, where you get a new name?
Yes, exactly. Yep, exactly right. Yep. So here's the question: okay, let's say somebody has a conversion experience that is catastrophic. What happens to that person's self? Does the self also become converted? It's a big deal. So, in other words, Paul's essential self, does that change? And if so, how might that change? You're not going to be, well, okay. It's a really important question. It's something we talk about at Pine Rest often. You know, when you have a patient coming in the hospital, what are we looking to do here? Is the person's core self, going to change in any way? And we finally came down and said, no. They're not going to change their core self. So in Paul's case, he's really narcissistic, right? It's me, I'm the worst of all sinners. I mean, really? Please. I could come up with quite a few ahead of you. You know, it's always, he's self-aggrandizing after his conversion. So is our essential selves changed with conversion? I don't think so.
He certainly seems to me, in my very limited knowledge of the Bible, it seems to me to remain very zealous.
Right. Yeah.
Intense, very intense.
Exactly. Yeah. So maybe what changes is the direction that the self takes. With like narcissism, for instance, I think clearly he's a narcissist, or at least he's got a lot of narcissistic tendencies. But he gives himself over to a more redemptive worldview. So that changes. What you do changes. But who you are really does not change. That makes sense? There are a lot of Christians that would challenge that. They would say, no, the essential self will change. I don't see it. I've never seen it. I've never seen a person's essential self change. Never. Because that's your first 18 months of life, you know, that's object relations, right? All that.
So when the Bible speaks of the old man and the new man, they're not talking about this self.
This is Tom, right? This is Tom Feet, and people would challenge us, but I cannot.
Trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I've never witnessed a change of self. So then, you're always going to be you.
I've heard of. I don't think this is change of self either, but. You know, I've heard of people who were alcoholics and got saved and never took another drink or what have you. Something changes, but I don't think either is probably the essential self.
Well, that's it. So when anyway, I just think it's an important point because people will come in too, and I've met a number of people who, over the years, who would say, you know, I don't like myself. And, you know, sorry, you know, you're kind of stuck with that one. Now, how you can move forward as a person, you can become a more gracious person. You can live for a higher calling than what you're presently living for, and on and on.
Change your behavior.
Change your behavior.
The behavior, I think, that people don't like. Although, I guess feelings of anger and hatred and bias, people probably don't like those too, hopefully.
Yeah, well, that's, when I say worldview, that kind of plays into that, I think.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for instance, like for St. Paul, he goes from his, his previous exploits as far as persecuting the church to writing 1 Corinthians 13, right? Which is, love is patient, love is kind, love is what you hear at weddings. I always preface it at a wedding by saying this was written by a first-class hater, just so you know. And so it's just a good question. What changes when we decide to deepen our faith, deepen our practice? What is really in motion here as far as a person and their self?
Okay, so I disagree. I'm definitely one of those people that doesn't, I feel, Paul never met Christ. He never really met the apostles except briefly. He met Peter and one of the other apostles.
Uh-huh.
And what happened to him definitely brought some sort of change.
Oh,
I think
that must be
that
nice.
without that change, he could never have wrestled with and been able to explain some of the profound theology that's found in his writings if he had not changed his self. And I think that, the Spirit of God works in you and brings you through particular experiences. I don't know whether I was living in La La Land for a lot of years, but I just thought, spreading the gospel and evangelizing the world after Christ rose and ascended was not that hard of a deal. I did myself a study of Paul and his works, and it was awful. It was so hard to preach this concept of Christ and Christ crucified and Christ coming to change the law and showing how the law didn't get you where you needed to be. I think that all he struggled with, if his narcissism was there, he wouldn't have been able to be victorious. And I think that he speaks to the struggle and how the victory comes, but it's not immediate. One person.
Well, it's a big issue, and it's a profound issue, I would say. No matter what position you take, for sure. Yeah, sure. Anybody else? Thank you. Yeah. Anybody else?
There was clearly change, or he would have continued it in his role as Saul.
No question. There's change. Definitely change. I think love came into his life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't he lame? Didn't he become lame too? Didn't he have trouble walking?
He was bow-legged. We know that.
I mean, after he was,
He talked about having a thorn in his side. Is that what you're referring to?
maybe that's it.
Yeah, and
That happened at the time that Jesus said, "Why are you persecuting me?" Right?
No, that passage comes later than that. But they've done for all of these things. Theologians and biblical scholars. I mean, they dive deep into all this stuff and have for centuries and centuries. So some people have said that this is a physical malady that he had. He's got a thorn in his side, or he has headaches, or he has something. But there's another one that I like personally, because I've been a minister for a long time, is a thorn in your side can also be a person. Right, and we've used that too. You're a thorn in my side. So some people think it was somebody who's, giving them a hard time. I don't know who that would be. Anyway, so let's talk a little bit about that. You can kind of split Paul's letters into two sorts. One sort is, I would say, our magisterial theological works, where Paul is taking the life, teaching, death, and resurrection of Jesus, let's say, in a Jewish context, don't forget, and he's saying what is new about Jesus, what is the point of this life that's occurred, and he's going to wax eloquent, certainly many times, about what is the meaning of this. And the book of Romans, the book of Corinthians, the book of Ephesians, these are what I would consider to be magisterial texts having to do with that. And there's always a therefore. We have this, he's going to paint this picture of Jesus in a Jewish context and of a universal context as well, and say, and this is why it's important. So those big ticket books of St. Paul I'm talking about can be, you can kind of cut them almost exactly in half. The first half is theological, the second half is so what. Okay, everybody got that? And then, so those are the magisterial books, books. And then we've got the other writings of St. Paul are these little letters. And we call those the pastoral epistles. And so he's taking on really kind of specific issues and what's going on in these little churches and how to set up shop as a congregation, things like that. Forgot my coat. If anybody can grab my coat for me and bring it over. Things like little things. They're sweet. I had to translate all the Gospels in Amsterdam. I had to translate all the Gospels, and I had to translate all of the pastoral epistles from photographs of old manuscripts. That's what they made me do, and that started my long pilgrimage with drinking. So anyway, no, it was a lot of fun and interesting. So that's how we kind of that's how I kind of understand St. Paul's writings. But by far, the letter of St. Paul, the writing of St. Paul, by far, the one with the most weight is the book of Romans. By far. The book of Romans, if there were no book of Romans, you'd be hard-pressed to have a Christian church. He sets the theology up. Why is this life, Jesus, why is this life important? Why is it important in a Jewish context? Why is it important in a universal context? Without that, we would really have a tough time having a church of any kind, in my view. And that book of Romans lit the fuse for the Protestant Reformation. You would never have a Protestant Reformation without the book of Romans. Okay, Martin Luther was a Catholic monk, and that's a long story too. But he had the opportunity to translate the entire Bible into German, which had never been done before. And when he hit on Romans, it was an explosion in his mind. And it changed world history, that book, the book of Romans, and particularly Luther's translation of it. And then in last century, a person by the name of Karl Barth, you know that name? Karl Barth is a Reformed Church minister in Switzerland. Actually, I had the president of our seminary and a teacher of mine was a student of Barth's in Switzerland. And he wrote a commentary on the book of Romans. And that too exploded throughout the world, the Christian world. And Karl Barth, a lot of people would say he's the greatest theologian since Augustine. So I've got all his books at home now. But I would say all classically trained theological students read Karl Barth. You can't get out of
Why
some.
don't we concentrate on the book of Romans?
Pardon me?
Why don't we concentrate on the book of Romans?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, if you'd like to do it, right? We'll spend a few weeks on Romans. The other, and if you like this sort of thing, we can. What I had in mind was, with these magisterial texts, is to read the first bits of all of them. There's about 5 of them, and just to see how Paul paints this picture. He's huge, he's like this huge theological canvas that he's painting. They're really quite incredible. And then maybe if we have time, we can get into kind of the other the therefores of each text. You want to give that a shot? Okay. Well, he's writing. All right. We'll take a look at Romans. If you want to take a look at it. Paul had never been to Rome when he wrote this. He'd never been there. But how important do you think a church in Rome would be? Pretty darn important. There's some really important people there, as far as political people.
It's a direct threat to the empire.
Pardon me?
It's a direct threat to the empire.
Yeah. You have to deal with power at some point. So I don't know if you drive around towns in Europe and the United States, how close are the churches to City Hall?
But everything is clustered in the village.
Yeah, everything's clustered in the village, but you'll see,
They look like City Hall a little bit.
in a bank. That's on purpose. After Constantine, there was a wedding with the Roman Empire and the Christian Church. And we just, maybe 40 years ago, decided to get divorced. So we're in a really new period of the Christian Church that we haven't seen for 1,700 years. So it's all new. And some people are saying that's horrible. We used to have 185 kids in Sunday school, and we had 1,400 people in choir, and the number always goes up. I've noticed every year. And those were the good old days. Well, what they're describing is a Constantinian church, and even today, there's lots and lots of people, not just here in the United States, but here in the United States that want to get back to that, and we call that Christian nationalism. They want to get back to Constantine, back in the good old days, back when we could count on things, back in the days where what we said in church was what we did in Congress. As far as that goes, people are scared to death. That's what's motivating this, and other people are saying, I think the church was maybe a little healthier prior to Constantine. the first 300 years of the church is better. It was dangerous, and some of us lost our heads, but it was healthier. It was healthier. Because power wedded to religion is horrendously bad, in my opinion. Horrendously bad. Okay? So, but for 1700 years, the church has been imbued with power. I think it's a mistake.
It's not very Jesus.
Right, yeah. I mean, Jesus had a lot of power, but it wasn't coercive power. Yeah, and so can you really base an institution on his version of power? It's a really good question. I think most Christians would say no. Jesus is outdated. Have you heard this? I mean, that's all over the country right now. Jesus is passé. They don't want Jesus. They want Constantine. That's the person that's going to protect us. That's the person that's going to keep it down. And Jesus is saying that's all fine, but that's not going to get you home. It's going to be a power play. It's going to have to do with power. It's going to have to do with military. It's going who do you trust? I mean, and Jesus himself, of course, gets crucified. And so a lot of Christians would say, see, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Love does not work. Isn't this fun? Well, why don't we take a look at old St. Paul? Let's start with 1. We're at 1:1. Yeah. Romans. What's 9:13 like in a Bible? Okay. Okay. So these little greetings are kind of important. How am I going to address the Roman Church? I don't know these people. I might know a few people that they know, maybe, but I really don't know. I've never been. So how am I going to start this introduction, really, of myself? These are the things that are kind of percolating in Paul. This is unbelievably important, what's going to be written. You're going to set out your whole theology. How am I going to do this? A lot at stake. So would someone read like 1:1 through 7? Please. Okay, thanks, Ann.
Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, called to be an apostle, set apart for the gospel of God, which he promised beforehand through his prophets in the Holy Scriptures, the gospel concerning his Son, who was descended from David according to the flesh, and was declared to be the Son of God, with power according to the Spirit of holiness by resurrection from the dead, Jesus Christ our Lord, through whom we have received grace and apostleship to bring about the obedience of faith among all the Gentiles for the sake of his name, including yourselves who are called to belong to Jesus Christ. To all God's beloved in Rome who are called to be saints, grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ.
Okay, great. Thank you.
A hell of a sentence.
It's one sentence.
Yeah, it's awful.
It's one sentence. What would you like to say to Paul right about now?
Learn to use a period.
That's right. Go to the University of Iowa writing workshop. Pay attention.
It's like stream of consciousness.
Yeah, it's really, yeah.
All those little clauses.
Yeah, wait a minute, then, and this, and that, it's layered.
This is a translation. They put a...
It's not any better in Greek.
Really?
Well, no, it's not any better in Greek. No. No.
That's how Paul speaks. Right?
That's how, yeah, it's stream
He's introducing himself to these.
Exactly, they don't know him. They don't know him. They've heard of him, but they don't know him. They've never met him. So, what do you think of that little introduction? It's got a lot of his mind. What's your impression of it?
It's like, you know, he's saying, he's important.
Yes.
He's an apostle, right? He's an apostle. Says who, right?
Well, in the beginning, it says, you know, well, see, this, I'm not even sure if I'm understanding it properly. You know, Paul, the servant, which he promised beforehand through his prophets in the Holy Scriptures, the gospel would concerning us, and saying this is where he comes from.
Mhm.
He's been appointed by God.
I'm a part of this stream,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Oh, big God.
Yeah.
Oh, no wonder it all has to be in one sentence.
That's right.
Gotta pile it on.
Yeah, you got to keep it it's got to all be connected. I mean, was he a follower of Jesus in the Gospels?
No.
Was he one of the 12
No.
disciples? No. So he's got to establish his credibility. This is great. You're a Pharisee. We know you because of that. We know that you studied under Gamaliel. We know that. Because there's Jewish believers in Rome as well at this time. So they probably, they might have heard his name. They certainly knew Gamaliel. So he's trying to legitimize who he is. He's trying to tell them who he is. And what else is he saying to them?
He's setting a historic precedent.
Say it again.
He's setting a historic precedent.
Okay, so it's the Old Testament. We saw this coming in the Old Testament. He didn't see it coming, by the way. He didn't see it coming, which is the issue, right, with him. And he'll get to that. He did not see it coming until he saw it coming. You see what I mean? Isn't that true for a lot of us?
Oh, yeah.
Right? You don't see it coming until you see it coming. And then it really hits you. It really strikes you. We had an organ in Hyde Park, and a tracker organ, so it's pulling, a tracker. Really cool instrument. And it broke down. The church was poor as church mice. We can't afford to fix it. We're not even going to look into it. We're so afraid of what it's going to cost, so let's just get an electronic organ to replace it. So they did. It's nice. It's a Wurlitzer. It'll suit us really well. Well, we got a guy in our church who was a medical engineer, put pipettes into people's brains, and he said, "Well, let me look at it." And it was down for 30 years. And he reported back to me. He said, "Switch was out." I'm not kidding. $2. $2. Right? I mean, and I think sometimes our lives are like that too. Things are so obvious, but we're so afraid to look and explore it that, we're going to, it's too much of a risk to know. And I think Paul was going through that too. And then you're stuck with your metaphors, you're stuck with your religion, you're stuck with your point of view, you're stuck with your worldview, you're just stuck, until you're not stuck. And what is that like? Have you ever had that in your life? Where you go from stuck to like you're shot out of a cannon? Well, this is Millbrook. We don't share about our lives. It's not Pine Rest Christian Hospital. But it's Yeah, I remember I was in Grand Rapids. It was a really bad winter. Bad. I mean, a lot of snow, a lot of cold, and 0 sun. That's Western Michigan, where I come from. For weeks and weeks and weeks. I was so sick of it. And I told my then wife, I said, I got to get out of here. I have to get out of here. Let's go to England where it's better. Obviously, I had never been to England in the winter, but you got to pick somewhere. And couldn't go. We didn't have any money. Let's just go for the weekend and just get out of here. No, we can't do that. I can't afford that. Blah 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 blah. And so about a month later, I had a professor that said, Virgil Cruz said, we'd like you to go to Amsterdam for a year and a half. We'll pay for it. And it was, and I've never been the same since. I mean, just so you know, I was a lovely, lovely person before that. Yeah. At what point do we say, it's not working anymore? And then what do you do? What do you do? So here's St. Paul. So all of the beloved in Rome are going to be called saints. How do you feel about that? Catholics, you can, ex-Catholics, present Catholics, how do you feel about that? Who's a saint?
I wish.
We've got All Saints coming up, right? I mean, we're right here, All Saints Day. What are we talking about? What are we talking about when we're talking about a saint? What is he talking about?
Those in grace.
So the people, the Christians in Rome,
Living in grace.
they what?
Those living in grace.
Living in grace. Okay.
The believers.
The believers. Mm-hmm. How spectacular do you have to be to?
If you perform a miracle or 3 miracles or something. That's a Catholic idea.
Those are
Two. You got to get two. As I understand it, you have to have 2 miracles.
They wanted to make it an exclusive club, I think.
Well, you want to. We love separation, don't we? We love separation. When Paul's talking about saints, who is he talking about? You? I mean, really, seriously, is he talking about you? Is he talking about me?
I think so. Yeah, so.
I think he is.
Yeah.
I think he is. Not that, extraordinary acts of faith, people being martyred, are not worthy of praise, I would say, or, astonishment, or whatever we're going to do, or remembrance. But when it comes down to being a saint, I think Paul is saying if you're participating in a life of grace, God's grace, that's what you are.
I mean, I think he is talking about us, but I can say for myself, it's kind of hard to believe. I have to convince myself or talk myself into it or something like that.
Yeah.
Really?
It's kind of
Saint?
maybe it's a little bit like being adopted. You can say you're mine, but then there's got to be maybe years of, this is. I mean, I wasn't adopted, but my parents would say to me, "You are a part of this family, aren't you?" Meaning, oh, it was ugly. We're the Feets. Did you forget? This is who we are. And maybe saints are like that too. You're proclaimed a saint, but it takes a while to kind of live into it. What it might mean for you. What God might be asking you to do.
I wonder if a lot of people are like me in the sense that you kind of really have to talk yourself into it, remind yourself. How can this be?
Right. Receive it. How do you receive it? It's grace. It's not something you earn. It's just, it's given to you. It's just,
It's not something I think about myself every day, every minute of every day. If I did, maybe I would be a better person.
Well, I think that the meaning of saint might have changed over this time. I
it
mean,
certainly has.
now, people say, oh, you were a saint, meaning you did something exceptionally good.
Exactly, yeah.
You know, maybe in those days, in the days of Paul, saints were just people who were
Mhm.
part of a group that believed.
That's right, yeah. I think you're absolutely right. But we want to stratify things so often. You know, I'm a better than you are, or I'm a better blank than you, or a better
And then-
whatever.
And then the Catholics and the Eastern Orthodox
Too, yeah,
churches,
yeah.
and, you know, solidified that belief that
Mhm.
saints had to be extraordinarily good.
Yeah. And then what are we called, the rest of us? If you're not a saint in that system, then what are you?
A sinner.
A sinner. Oh, yeah. Let's see, which would I'd rather be? Yeah, sinners are having way more fun than the saints.
Yeah.
All right, so that's his opening paragraph, and this last line, grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. I've said that for 36 years, starting the service, and that's where I get it from. And this will not be the only time you hear that from St. Paul. This is, grace to you and peace. Who wants it? From God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And, I was going to get into anyway. So, we have a few more minutes. Somebody want to read 8 through 15?
First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you, because your faith is proclaimed throughout the world. For God, whom I serve with my spirit by announcing the gospel of his Son, is my witness that without ceasing I remember you always in my prayers, asking that by God's will I may somehow at last succeed in coming to you. For I am longing to see you so that I might share with you some spiritual gift to strengthen you, or rather so that we may be mutually encouraged by each other's faith, both yours and mine. I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that I have often intended to come to you, but thus far have been prevented, in order that I may reap some harvest among you as I have among the rest of the Gentiles. I am a debtor both to Greeks and barbarians, both to the wise and to the foolish. Hence, my eagerness to proclaim the gospel to you, also who are in Rome.
Okay. Does he ever make it to Rome? Fantastic visit. So talk to me a little bit about Gentiles. I think this is the second time he's mentioned Gentiles. What is a Gentile?
Non-Jew.
A non-Jew. Okay. So why is he tying that in? What do Gentiles have to do with this?
Jesus said to go and speak to all people.
And what's happening there? I thought this was a Jewish thing. Wasn't Jesus Jewish? Isn't this a Jewish story?
But the Gentiles are going to get grafted in. He's setting up for that, I guess.
Yeah. So you got this Pharisee taught by Gamaliel, who's about as Jewish. He had a really big nose too. There's some historical references outside the Bible about St. Paul. So he's short, he's bow-legged, he's bald, and he's got a big nose. So we know that. But this movement was strictly, I mean, we got the whole Old Testament. This movement of God's story, let's say, is strictly Jewish until Jesus. Is that what we're to understand? Yes? No?
Yeah, Jesus told them to go out to all people,
Mhm.
you know, when he was towards the end of his life,
Yeah.
you know, to go out to all people,
Gospel of John, yeah. And spread what?
the word.
The word. And what's the word? What's the word? What's being said? The gospel, and gospel means
Good news.
good news. You've got some good news to say, to tell people. So Jesus, some people will say, I kind of like this image, and I've said this before too, of course. Jesus acts like a prism, where you've got the Old Testament is, you know, Abraham and Sarah, right? It's just a couple, and then it becomes a tribe, and then it becomes a nation, and then Jesus comes along and it refracts throughout the world. That's useful for me to think about Jesus. Good news becomes democratic. Everybody gets it. Everybody's going to get an offer of good news. Everybody. And Paul is called to be one of the main architects of that refraction throughout the world. I mean, he's an interesting choice, right? I mean, you've got this highly educated, classically trained Jewish scholar, really is what he is, and he's jumping on a boat or walking, you know, or taking a highway. But he was on boats a lot, which is very un-Jewish, by the way. Jewish people in his day were terrified of the sea, unless, you know, they'd keep the land in sight. They never got further. That's 15 miles, by the way, I can tell you. Yeah, you wouldn't go anywhere further than that. He's jumping on a ship, going all over the place. Very un-Jewish thing to do. And he's spreading good news about the Old Testament and about Jesus to people that don't know anything about Judaism. It's a weird, kind of a weird story, isn't it?
Well, and most of the apostles were fishermen.
Right? Yeah, they were, but they kept close. They kept close, right? They're never gonna get so far out that they can't see land. So, yeah, it's an odd choice. I find it an odd choice to have somebody like that.